goat's hair at the top of the mattress. This is a treat, since poor people don't usually sleep with pillows. The woman's face is dark with thinking. She has something on her mind. Her name is Mary. Yeshi. Now a small boy comes into the room. His head is wrapped in a rough piece of cloth, a bandage brown with blood. This is Mary's son. She calls him Yeshi as a nickname, but his real name is Jesus. Let's have a look at it, she says. Mary unties the bandage, and in the middle of the child's forehead is a gash, a purple wound, and Mary touches it. Does it still hurt, she says? Jesus nods, his eyes big with sadness. I'm sorry those boys threw stones at you, his mother says. She opens a small stone jar and pours olive oil onto the tips of her fingers. Gently, she rubs the oil on Jesus' forehead to keep the bandage from sticking to the wound. It wasn't your fault, Yeshi, Mary says. People can be cruel. Just after you were born, a very old man named Simeon, made a prophecy about you. He said that when you grow up, people will hurt you much worse than this. Ah, Yeshi. The woman binds the bandage around her child's head, then hugs him tightly. Lie down and I will tell you a story before you sleep. As Jesus crawls under the blanket, his mother stretches out beside him, saying, it's a true story, a very important story. It's the story of how you were born. And the reason why I want to tell it to you is love. You should never forget the love. When the bad days come, you should remember that on the night you were born, the whole sky exploded with love, and the angels shouted, and more than 1,000 hearts were in love with my baby Jesus on his birthday. Yeshi, it's time to come in. Mary is calling through the window lattice to her son, who is still outside in the night. The straw mattress is already unrolled. Yeshi, come. The room they sleep in is also the room that she cooks in. Her small clay stove sits in the far corner together with 3 copper cooking pots, 4 earthen bowls, 2 water jars, and 7 goatskin bags filled with grain and lentils and salt and spices. When they eat, they sit on the floor at a nice round mat. Ah, Yeshi, look at you, Mary cries as Jesus enters the room. His hair is tangled, he's covered in dust, his bandage is dirty and loose. Mary unties the bandage altogether. Oh no, she whispers. The wound is angry, red, infected. Sit down, Mary says. She goes to a pot of warm water and mixes salt into it. She returns with the water and a rag and a jar of medicine and sits down beside her son. I have to wash it, she says. I'm sorry, Yeshi, but when I wash it, it will burn. The burning is the healing. Hush, hush, says Mary. She puts her left arm around her son. With her right hand, she begins to wash his face, his forehead, and his terrible wound. Ow, Jesus gasped. His eyes go very wide, and then the tears come into them and start to run down his dirty cheeks. Oh, I know, his mother murmurs, but it must come clean. Soon Mary is smearing medicine on his clean wound, an ointment made from animal fat and lint and honey. Honey kills germs. No bandage this time. Softly, Jesus is crying. So Mary gathers him into her arms and rocks him back and forth, back and forth. I love you, my son. Just as I told you in the story last night, I loved you from the very beginning. Tonight I'll tell you about someone else who loved you, even before you were born. You see, your adopted daddy almost didn't marry me. I decided to stay with my cousin Elizabeth until her baby was born, and that was a long time, about 3 months. And all the while I was gone, I missed Joseph the carpenter, strong and true. We were engaged to be married. We were betrothed. Yeshi, a very serious thing to be. It's the same as marriage, except that we weren't living in the same house yet. 8 days after Elizabeth's baby was born, I started to travel home to Nazareth. The little life in my stomach slowed me down, but I felt so happy and so excited because I had such wonderful news to tell Joseph. As soon as I was back in Nazareth, I rushed over to Joseph's house and knocked on the door. Joseph, Joseph, come out, I called. Wait till I tell you what God is doing for us. The door opened up and there was Joseph, big as a bear, grinning and nodding and spreading his arms. I ran straight into those arms and he hugged me with his wonderful strength. Suddenly he stepped back and patted me on my stomach. "Mary," he said, "you're getting fat." "Yes," I said, "isn't that wonderful?" Joseph frowned, puzzled. "It's good to be fat," he said. "Well," I said, "there's a good reason why I'm fat. A tiny little reason deep down inside of me." Joseph frowned harder. "Mary, is this a riddle?" I giggled and pinched his big nose. "It's better than a riddle," I laughed. "It's a living thing. Yesterday, Joseph, I felt that little tiny reason wiggle in my stomach." "Wiggle," Joseph said. "How can a reason wiggle?" "Oh, Joseph," I shouted, "it's a baby. I'm going to have a baby." "A baby?" he said. "Yes, this is what God is doing for us, a baby." I put out my arm so that he could hug me again, but he didn't. Joseph's frown grew darker and darker like the cloud. "This is impossible," he said. Unless... "It's a baby straight from God," I said. "Won't you hug me, Joseph?" He lowered his head. He didn't look at me. His frown got so hard that it broke, and only sadness was left. I saw tears running down from his eyes. "Joseph, please hug me," I said. "Oh, Joseph, hug me again." But he turned away from me. He went into his house and shut the door, and I was left alone. It wasn't his baby, you see. He thought it belonged to another man. But we were betrothed. If I was having a baby by another man, then this would be a wicked sin. "Joseph, I didn't sin," I shouted through the door. "Truly, I did not sin against God, and I did not sin against you." He didn't answer me. He didn't say anything. He didn't come out again. Finally, I went to my own house, and I fell on my bed, and I burst into tears. All day long, I cried. Joseph is a good man, strong and true. He always obeys the laws of God. And because he thought that I had sinned, I knew exactly what he was planning to do. He was going to divorce me and never see me again. That's why I was crying so hard. That night, my mother brought me some soup, but I told her I wasn't hungry and to leave me alone. Early the next morning, my father came into my room and said, "You haven't slept all night." I said, "Leave me alone." He said, "Should I tell Joseph to leave you alone too?" "Joseph?" I whispered. "Is Joseph here?" "Yes, just outside the door." I jumped up and ran outside, and there he was. There was my own dear Joseph, big as a bear. He wasn't frowning anymore, so I went to him, and yes, he hugged me so hard that we both started crying together. He said, "I was going to divorce you." I said, "I know." He said, "But last night, the angel of the Lord came to me in my sleep and told me that your baby is from God. He said we should name the baby Jesus." "Jesus," I whispered. "That's exactly what the angel told me too." "Oh, Joseph, I was so lonely I thought you were never coming back to me." "Well," he said, "the real reason why I came is to ask. Will you go home with me right now? Mary, I want you to be my wife starting now and lasting as long as we both live." Oh, how the birds sang in the sky that day, while I went home with my new husband Joseph, the carpenter, strong and true. You see, Yeshi, 6 months before you were born, a good man promised to love you as much as I do, your adopted daddy, Joseph. Now, he has traveled south over a valley and over the hills, south to the house of my cousin Elizabeth. He's building her a whole new roof. It's a hard job and it takes a long time to make someone's house warm and dry, but he will come home when he is done, Yeshi, to keep our house warm and dry, and maybe he'll bring you a gift when he does. Maybe. Does your forehead sting now? No, I'm glad. Salt is healing the hurt. Sleep, my child, sleep tonight, and soon I will tell you the very best part of your birthday story, which we will start next week, because Mary says that she told him about her love and Joseph's love, and about how the angel came first to her and then to her adopted daddy. But now comes the best love in all the world, and this time, Yeshi, the angels come on account of you. So we will pick up that next week and talk about the night the angels sang and the night that Jesus was actually born. But I love this book so much because they showed, and it's so true to life, it showed Jesus hurt. He hurt at Christmas. He was human. He was just like us. Okay? He knows. And he started from very lowly setting. He came from a poor family. Okay, so Jesus was able to understand and can continue today to understand everyone, whether you are poor, whether you are rich, whether you are whatever situation you are in your life. And all Jesus understood it because he lived it. He felt pain, he felt joy, he felt happiness, he felt the love of his family. He knew all of those things, and so he is just our one constant. He has never changed. He hasn't changed then, he doesn't change today, and he's there for us. And we will talk more next week, of course, about that glorious night. And that's the one where I really get my imagination going, because what a night that must have been. And so we will visit that next week. Will you pray with me?